When you've been caught in the orbit of a narcissistic person, it often feels like you've been pulled into something you didn't see coming, something you didn't consent to, and something that drains you before you even realize you're trapped. The difficulty is that narcissism isn't just one thing, one look, or one behavior. There are many different types, and each one has its own way of pulling you in, of making you question yourself, of tangling you up in confusion and self-doubt until you're no longer sure which way is out. Understanding how each type operates, how each type traps you, is one of the most important ways to begin reclaiming your clarity, your strength, and your sense of self. Let's begin with the grandiose narcissist. The one most people think of when they hear the word. They are loud, charismatic, commanding, often successful on the surface. They pull you in with confidence that feels intoxicating, with promises that seem larger than life, and with a presence that makes you feel like you've been chosen for something extraordinary. The trap here is built on admiration. You may find yourself admiring their ambition, their accomplishments, or simply their energy. And because they thrive on being admired, they know how to cultivate that in others. They'll shower you with attention at the start, make you feel special for being in their circle, and then, slowly, they'll begin to take more than they give. The trap is that you confuse admiration with connection. You think their spotlight shining on you is intimacy, when in reality, it's just a way to keep you orbiting them. You begin to doubt yourself when the spotlight turns away, wondering what you did wrong, when the truth is that you were never meant to be anything but an audience in their theater. Then there's the vulnerable narcissist, the quieter one, the one who doesn't look like the stereotype. This is the narcissist who leads with their pain, their struggles, their disappointments. They will present themselves as misunderstood, overlooked, mistreated by everyone else, and you will feel a pull to comfort them, to prove that not everyone is cruel. The trap here is empathy. They know exactly how to tug on your compassion, to make you feel responsible for their emotional world. They'll say things like, "No one else has ever understood me the way you do." And you'll feel needed in a way that can be intoxicating. But over time, you realize that your role is to endlessly soothe, endlessly reassure, endlessly pour out energy into a well that never fills. The trap is guilt. If you ever try to step back, you're made to feel like you're abandoning someone fragile, someone who can't make it without you. And so you stay, drained but unable to cut free, because the idea of being one more person who failed them weighs heavily on your conscience. The malignant narcissist is more dangerous. This is the one who blends narcissism with cruelty, with a lack of empathy that is chilling, with a tendency toward aggression or exploitation. The trap here is fear. They may lure you in at first with charm, but quickly you realize that criticism, intimidation, and control are their tools. You might stay because you're afraid of what they'll do if you leave, or because they've convinced you that you're worthless without them. The trap is survival. Your energy becomes consumed with trying not to upset them, with walking on eggshells, with shrinking yourself to avoid their wrath. Over time, your identity becomes eroded because you've been conditioned to believe that safety comes only from compliance. And the more you comply, the more they control, until the idea of freedom feels dangerous rather than liberating. The communal narcissist is the one who presents themselves as the most giving, the most charitable, the most selfless. On the surface, they appear to be saints. They volunteer, they give, they speak endlessly about their good deeds. They pull you in because you admire their generosity, their apparent goodness. The trap here is idealization. You may believe you've finally found someone who is genuinely kind, who truly wants to make the world better. But as time goes on, you realize that their giving always comes with strings, that their kindness is a performance, and that if you ever fail to acknowledge how wonderful they are, you'll be punished with withdrawal, resentment, or passive aggression. The trap is appearances. You feel pressure to maintain the illusion that they are as good as they seem. Because if you call it out, you'll look like the cruel one. You may even doubt your own perception because everyone else praises them so much. There's also the covert narcissist, sometimes overlapping with the vulnerable type, but slightly different. The covert narcissist doesn't always seem obvious at first. They're not loud, they're not showy, but they carry a quiet entitlement and resentment that permeates everything. The trap here is subtlety. They don't come at you directly. Instead, they pull you in with passive-aggressive comments, with quiet sulking, with subtle put-downs masked as jokes. You may feel like you're the one always overreacting because their tactics are hard to point to clearly. The trap is self-doubt. You start questioning whether you're too sensitive, whether you're imagining things because they've trained you to believe that you're misreading their intentions. And so you keep giving them the benefit of the doubt, even as your confidence slowly erodes. The somatic narcissist, who obsesses over appearance, body, and sexuality, traps you through allure. They present themselves as the most attractive, the most desirable, and they make you feel lucky to be chosen by them. The trap here is comparison. They constantly remind you, overtly or covertly, that they could have anyone and that you need to work to keep them interested. They might flirt openly with others or constantly seek validation about their looks, and you find yourself competing with an invisible standard. The trap is insecurity. You start feeling that you're never enough, that you have to prove your worth to keep their attention, even though their attention was never meant to stay in one place. Then there's the cerebral narcissist, who uses intellect as their weapon. They'll pull you in with intelligence, with knowledge, with wit, making you feel like you're in the presence of someone brilliant. At first, this can feel exciting, even flattering. But the trap here is superiority. They keep you hooked by making you feel intellectually inferior, by questioning your knowledge, by correcting you, by dismissing your perspectives as simplistic or naive. The trap is erosion of confidence. You start doubting your intelligence, your abilities, your insight, and soon you find yourself depending on them to define reality for you. The relationship becomes one where you're the student and they are the authority, and that imbalance becomes suffocating. The spiritual narcissist is another insidious type. They hide behind faith, enlightenment, or personal growth. They speak in lofty terms about morality, about spirituality, about higher consciousness, and they make you feel like being close to them is a pathway to becoming better yourself. The trap here is moral superiority. If you question them, they frame it as you being unspiritual, unenlightened, or stuck in negativity. They use spiritual language as a weapon to silence, to shame, to elevate themselves while keeping you small. The trap is disempowerment. You may find yourself silenced because you don't want to be seen as the one who lacks growth, when in truth, they're simply using spirituality as a shield for their narcissism. And finally, there is the neglectful narcissist, the one who traps you not with presence, but with absence. They draw you in with just enough attention, just enough affection, to hook you, but then they withdraw. They disappear emotionally, sometimes physically. They make you chase their approval, their attention, their love. The trap here is longing. You spend your energy trying to recapture those brief moments when they seemed engaged, when they seemed loving, when they seemed available. The trap is intermittent reinforcement, the same psychological mechanism that keeps people hooked on gambling. You never know when the payoff will come, so you keep investing, keep hoping, keep waiting. And in that waiting, your needs go unmet, your self-worth erodes, and yet you cling to the idea that maybe, just maybe, this time will be different. What unites all of these traps is the way they make you question yourself. Whether it's admiration, empathy, fear, appearances, subtlety, comparison, superiority, morality, or longing. The common thread is that you lose sight of your own center. You begin to orbit around them, bending your sense of self to fit into the role they've designed for you. You become entangled not because you are weak, but because you are human. Because you want to love, to help, to admire, to be admired, to connect, to be chosen. The tragedy is that narcissistic people exploit those very human longings, turning them into shackles that keep you bound. The truth is that every type of narcissist uses a trap that speaks to something inside of us, something universal. They don't create the need, they exploit it. And that's why it can be so difficult to break free. Because it's not just about walking away from them. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that got tangled in their snare. It's about recognizing that admiration is not the same as intimacy, that empathy doesn't require self-erasure, that fear is not love, that appearances are not reality, that subtle abuse is still abuse, that comparison is a losing game, that intellect doesn't define worth, that spirituality is not a weapon, and that longing doesn't mean love. When you see the trap for what it is, you can begin to step back. You can begin to disentangle yourself not only from them, but from the story they wrote about you. You can reclaim your agency, your clarity, your dignity, and you can recognize that being trapped once doesn't mean you will always be trapped. Because knowledge is power, and once you understand how the trap is built, you're no longer walking blindly into it. You can choose differently. You can choose freedom. Every narcissist knows how to find the entry point into your life. And it's almost never obvious at first. What makes their influence so powerful is that they don't invent needs in you. They exploit the ones that already exist. Everyone wants to feel admired, to be understood, to feel safe, to connect, to be chosen, and to know that their compassion matters. These are natural human longings, but in the hands of a narcissist, they become doorways into a trap. The grandiose one uses your admiration, making you believe that being close to them is a privilege. The vulnerable one leans into your empathy, drawing you into endless cycles of comforting them while your own needs are neglected. The malignant one uses fear as the chain, convincing you that the only way to survive is to keep them satisfied. The communal one builds the trap out of appearances, presenting themselves as impossibly kind, so that you feel like you must protect their reputation even when your experience tells you otherwise. The covert one thrives on subtlety, eroding your trust in your own perception until you wonder if you're imagining things. The somatic one uses comparison, keeping you trapped in insecurity. The cerebral one elevates superiority, making you believe your value is tied to their intellect. The spiritual one takes advantage of your desire to grow, silencing you with guilt when you question them. And the neglectful one relies on longing, giving you just enough attention to keep you waiting for more. Each type sets the snare differently, but the goal is the same: to keep you bound by your own humanity so that you don't see you're giving away your power piece by piece. The common thread in every encounter with a narcissist is the erosion of self. It doesn't matter which type you are dealing with, the outcome is remarkably similar. At first, you may feel alive in their presence, seen, chosen, significant. But slowly, the dynamics shift, and what begins as light turns into shadow. The grandiose narcissist has you second, guessing why their attention suddenly fades, so you blame yourself. The vulnerable one makes you feel like your boundaries are cruelty, so you bend further and further until you disappear. The malignant one trains you to believe safety only exists when you comply, so you lose your sense of agency. The communal one convinces you that your doubt is betrayal, so you stay silent and accept what doesn't feel right. The covert one whispers insults masked as jokes, and when you react, you wonder if you're being too sensitive. The somatic one keeps you in constant comparison, so your confidence drains with every glance they throw at someone else. The cerebral one redefines your worth through their intellect until you depend on their approval to feel competent. The spiritual one manipulates your desire to grow, silencing your instincts by making you feel you're not enlightened enough. The neglectful one gives you just enough affection to keep you hooked, but not enough to nourish your heart. What all of these traps have in common is that you begin to lose your own reflection. Your voice gets quieter, your instincts grow dim, and your needs feel like burdens. And as you doubt yourself, you lean harder into them, hoping they'll restore what they've taken, not realizing the restoration can only come when you step out of their grip and reclaim your sense of self. Once you begin to step back and really look, the patterns of narcissistic behavior become less mysterious. At first, it all feels confusing because you're caught in the middle of it, constantly second, guessing yourself, trying to decode mixed signals. But when you pause and observe, you see the repetition. The grandiose narcissist thrives on admiration and will always pull the spotlight back to themselves, no matter the situation. The vulnerable one cycles through endless stories of being wronged, always needing you to soothe them. The malignant one uses intimidation and cruelty as a predictable way of maintaining control. The communal one makes sure their goodness is loudly displayed so they can demand loyalty and praise. The covert one relies on quiet jabs and subtle guilt trips, leaving you questioning your own reactions. The somatic one is forever chasing validation through looks and attention, making you compete with an invisible standard. The cerebral one keeps a tally of intellectual superiority, reminding you in small or large ways that you're not quite enough. The spiritual one manipulates with lofty words, cloaking their control in a language of growth and higher purpose. The neglectful one plays hot and cold, giving just enough to keep you hooked, but withholding anything real. The beauty of recognizing these patterns is that once you name them, you cannot unsee them. What once felt like personal failure suddenly looks like a script they run on everyone. This awareness is what begins to break the spell, because it shows you that you are not the problem. You are simply caught in a cycle that repeats itself. And once you see it as a cycle, you can stop blaming yourself and start making choices that take you out of it. The most important realization is that freedom never comes from trying to fix the narcissist, because the trap itself is built on the belief that if you just love harder, give more, or stay longer, something will change. That's the illusion that keeps you bound. The grandiose one will not suddenly turn their spotlight into genuine intimacy. The vulnerable one will not one day stop needing endless reassurance. The malignant one will not soften into kindness because you've endured enough. The communal one will not give up performance of goodness just because you've proved your loyalty. The covert one will not suddenly own their passive aggression and apologize. The somatic one will not be satisfied enough to stop seeking attention elsewhere. The cerebral one will not stop elevating themselves by diminishing you. The spiritual one will not put down their weaponized enlightenment. The neglectful one will not transform absence into presence simply because you've waited faithfully. The work isn't in shifting them, it's in shifting yourself. It's in seeing clearly that what you're longing for doesn't exist in them, and it never will. It's in reclaiming the parts of yourself that were lost to their manipulation. Your voice, your needs, your instincts, your worth. It's about stepping away from the cycle of trying to earn love and choosing instead to give yourself the freedom you've been waiting for them to grant. Freedom is not about them changing. It's about you refusing to keep handing over your power. It's about trusting that what you bring, your empathy, your care, your strength, is valuable, and it doesn't need to be squandered in someone else's trap. The deeper you look at how each type of narcissist traps you, the more you see that the story was never really about them. It was always about how they used pieces of your humanity against you. Your admiration, your empathy, your fear, your longing, your compassion, your need to be seen and valued. These are not flaws, they are strengths. But in the wrong hands, they became chains that kept you bound. The lesson isn't to harden yourself or shut down those parts of who you are. It's to recognize who is safe to receive them and who is not. Once you see the patterns, once you name the tactics, the fog begins to lift. You realize that the confusion wasn't because you were weak, but because you were being deliberately manipulated. And with that clarity comes choice. The choice to stop playing a role in someone else's cycle. The choice to reclaim the voice that got quieter, the instincts that got silenced, and the worth that was chipped away. Freedom comes not in waiting for them to change, but in deciding you will no longer shrink to fit into their trap. You step out, not because they finally give you permission, but because you finally give it to yourself.